The logo for the turning table is on the back of your worship guide. It was created by a church member, a United Church member, a creative woman who is incredibly generous with her time and her talents. Our logo identifies those four fluid and flexible pillars: creativity, curiosity, and a willingness to listen, and a willingness to be curious. So that's one way that generosity began turning the tables. Another generous woman donated her building for the turning table to use. The turning table met in this building through all of 2019. She charged us no rent and paid our utilities. We also received a generous gift of a table, a literal turning table. It's a large round table with a lazy Susan in the middle. This was a donation from a generous couple who are part of the United Church. By the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020, it was evident that in addition to those four fluid and flexible pillars, the turning table was also turning upon the pillars of generosity and the pillars of relationship. And it was also turning upon the pillars of financial donations and grants. One of our original grants came from the Disciples of Christ under the heading of New Church Plants. The regional minister for Florida came to visit us and felt like we were a good fit. This grant was not only generous with funds, but also generous with training opportunities, conversation partners, and monthly coaching sessions. Sadly, by the end of the grant period, which would have been the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, in their opinion, or according to their criteria, the turning table really wasn't viable. And they suggested we close for two reasons. Number one, because we weren't able to count members. And number two, because we weren't able to name how we would financially sustain ourselves. So they suggested that we close, but the tables were already turning. They just weren't turning the way the church thought they should be turning. And when I say church, I mean church with the capital C, the organized institution, that church. The turning table wasn't turning on a certain number of members, and it wasn't turning on a certain number of dollars. It was turning on the counter narrative of the way that God chooses foolish and weak things to confound the powerful and the wise. The turning tables were turning on faith, turning on a dream, turning on a whole and holy vision, turning on generosity and relationship. Again, turning on the foolish and the weak things that are often confounding. For me, what began to emerge at that point, so it's been suggested the turning table stopped turning. I recognize the tables are turning. And what began emerging for me was a new and different understanding of sustainability. At the beginning of 2020, we no longer had a building. We no longer had the New Church grant. But what we did have was relationship. Relationships with everyday, ordinary people from the Black, white, Laotian, and Latinx community, which are in South Putnam County. The tables turned toward a different focus.